Welcome back to the PitchVision Academy Cricket Show. It's the 9th series, would you believe? We've been doing this for 9 years, different presenters, different show lengths and different ways of doing it, but it's always been about cricket, the cricket coaching podcast for you. My name's David Hinchliffe. I've been on most of these shows, and someone else who has been on, I'm going to say the vast majority of the shows by now, well, two people, in fact. The first is the director of cricket at Millfield School. It's Mark Garaway. Hello, Garras. I can't remember when you started on the show. It was a little while in, but it was several hundred shows ago, definitely.
Yeah, it was 2011. I started right at the end of 2011. I started doing this, and it's been one of the highlights of my working week in, week out. It's been magnificent, and obviously good company for half an hour, you gentlemen are. But it's just brilliant to connect with people, and then also to get the follow-up, isn't it, from all over the world, not just in emails, but also randomly. When I was over in the West Indies just before Christmas, I got off a plane, and the third person that I spoke to was just reveling in PitchVision, which was just magnificent. So it's fantastic to be involved still, and thank you for keeping me on board.
Yeah, well, no, thank you for coming along. And thanks also to the third person on the show. It's the head of cricket performance at Portsmouth Grammar School. It's Sam Lavery. Hello, Lavers. I think you're the newest boy in the team, but you've still been doing it for a long time as well, haven't you?
I think I'm the newest by a distance, but I've probably got about 150 shows in, would you say?
Well battered, lad.
Yeah.
Well battered. Yeah. Thanks very much. I was bowling at the time, so sorry about that.
You've just got to raise the microphone then, like that, and then show it to the audience.
Yeah. I've gone for 150 rather than scoring 150. I think.
The Mason Crane of the podcast.
Oh, come on now! Come on.
He's a good lad.
I'm sure he is.
It's only 3 years ago that our boys were playing against him. 2 years ago, probably. Can't remember.
He'll be. I think it's done him no harm. I think he's the type of guy that's going to deal with that pretty well. I mean, the question ultimately, which I've had all winter, is that I think there's been so many better ways to develop Mason Crane over the course of the last 6 months than making him do 12th man in England for ages and not play any county cricket, then making him do the same and sticking him into that frying pan. That to me is something that we don't want to repeat too often.
Player management isn't. Maybe people think we look at these things with kind of hindsight and stuff, but I think if you'd have been asked to manage him from 12 months ago, Garras, it may have been different.
Well, I mean, without going off the topic here, I sat with his parents at Lord's in September, where they were up at Lord's for a test match against the West Indies, and he was doing 12th man, and they basically traipsed around the country doing exactly that for a while, and he hardly bowled in county cricket. Now, the biggest shame of that is it was a time of year where probably he could have impacted upon games of cricket for Hampshire. He'd have definitely got overs under his belt, and whilst I recognise the value of being involved in that type of setup and getting used to the people and the environment and all of those things that we talk about on this show a lot, at the age of 20, he really needs to be learning about his bowling in the way that many of the great spinners have done in the past, and it's just been disappointing for me. There was a Lions tour out in Australia. He could have been playing heaps of cricket, bowling heaps out with the Lions, having a little bit of interjection into the test side over the course of a tour because they run alongside each other, and there were so many different ways of doing it. But I said exactly what I've just said on here, not with hindsight, which is what I normally do, but actually to his parents. And whilst that might not have been what they wanted to hear, I really believe that we need to nurture a talent like that rather than just think about what's best for us over the course of the next 3 months, which is effectively what we've done in the Ashes.
You can understand their excitement and Mason's excitement of you're going to be on the main Ashes tour and blah blah blah, and that is unbelievably exciting for someone of any age.
But incredible.
With a slightly more long term, he's not going to disappear in 2 years' time. He's a cricketer that's going to be around for 15 years plus. You would have thought so. You don't need to rush these things and get him bowling, get him batting as well.
Yeah. And even the greats, even the greats, especially early on, even the greats were, got biff for 100 from time to time. So, there's no reason not to. There's no reason to think, oh, he can't do it. Oh well, let's move on to the next one. That's not the way to go about it, is it?
Is there a story about your wrist spin coming here, David? Is that what you're alluding to?
No, I never. My wrist spin never got beyond the trying to get a tennis ball down the other end. So, I always envy the leg spinners. I've always think to myself, if I wasn't a wicket keeper, I'd probably have picked leg spin because that's my favourite. That's definitely my favourite. But I couldn't bowl it, so I just had to pick up the gloves instead. Make it easy for myself. And while we're talking about the Ashes, there was a thing I wanted to talk about this week, which is multiple formats. One of the, whether it's right or not, one of the criticisms of the England team is that they weren't prepared as well as they could have been for the Ashes because a lot of the focus is on one-day cricket and on trying to go for the 2019 World Cup and all that kind of thing. So what that means, I think, at lower levels is an interesting thing, is can you focus in on different formats all at the same time? Or do you have to sort of pick your battles and say, you know what, our main priority is going to be this, and it might mean that we don't perform to our best in, if you're a club team, for example, if you say, well, look, we may not be at our peak in 50-over cricket, but we think we can win a 20-over competition. And it happens in county cricket as well, doesn't it? You get teams that say, we're focusing in on 2020 and we're not necessarily going for great success in the championship. So is there a way that you can focus on everything? Or is it one of those things you have to sort of just pick your battles and say, look, this is what we're good at, this is what we can do well in, and we're going to go for that?
I think most of the time it's the latter. Picking your strengths, utilising the other competitions for different things, for development means. And very much, when I ran Somerset, we had to do that because we had such a young age group squad that the likelihood of us being experienced enough and savvy enough to play the longer game and do very well in it was limited. But we felt that we were strong in 2020 cricket, so we really focused on that, and fortunately all the gods were smiling and we ended up winning it. But it's rare, isn't it, that you have a player group that can be confident of being very, very strong within multiple formats in the same year. Very rare that happens. It does happen, but it's becoming increasingly rare. You've got to have a big player group, I think, in order. It's particularly at the top end of a game, and probably the same in club. You've got to have a big player group to be able to do it, or you've got to have the best team within the structure, or one of the best teams within the league structure, or alternatively, you're going to be playing at a level of cricket that is slightly beneath you and is easy to dominate. So that would be my view, is that you pick your battles wisely in the main, unless you're in one of those fortuitous situations that I've just mentioned. Yeah,
certainly in my experience in club cricket, you get different levels of player availability depending on what type of cricket they like to play. And generally speaking, your average club guy is probably going to want to play league cricket on a Saturday, and then that becomes your strongest team by default because maybe you've got two midweek evening 2020 games in a week, and that guy said, well, actually, I can only play on Saturday, so I'm just going to have I'll pick this. I'd rather pick the Saturday rather than play an evening game, away somewhere and you have to rush after work and all the rest of it. So it definitely does become what can we focus on and how can we make the improvements from what I've seen. What do you think, Lave? Is there a way of covering it all?
Probably, but in all honesty, to get everything covered and to compete to a high level at every single competition that's coming your way is extremely tough. And there may be some clubs at a lower level, probably yes, but at first class international level, the depth of squad, the range of squad, the depth of coaching staff as well, because the workload put onto people, not only in the travelling around all the matches, but also in the planning, the preparation, the review, the research into opposition, all these things come into play. There's so much that needs to be done if you're going to really do things well and target things, that if you're going to try and be all things to every competition, it is really, really tricky. That doesn't mean you're not gonna give everything your best, but you're gonna try and get something out of every competition you're in, and hopefully that experience is going to benefit you in the kind of area that you're targeting. But as you are at different levels, as you said, I think club cricket. There are certain clubs that will kind of have a real crack at everything, and that's not necessarily down to the quality of their players or the depth of their players. It's more just down to the kind of the club environment and the enthusiasm that people have for being part of that club, and the enjoyment that they have it as sort of playing cricket or being together, and I think you need that if you're going to get people to pitch up, like you said, for play the Saturday, play the National Cup on a Sunday, play the midweek 2020, all that kind of stuff. That takes a special club environment and a club atmosphere to really make that happen, and it doesn't happen very often.
And I guess this is a very leading question, but I guess when you look at England and you say, well, if England wanted to have a focus, because it's very hard to do everything, excel at everything. If England wanted to have a focus and they feel the best chance is of winning a World Cup rather than beating Australia and Australia, was it the right thing to do to say, we're going to give the Ashes our best crack, but actually it's not the biggest priority in the next, over this period, 3, 4, 5 year period?
Well, certainly over the 4-year period, and certainly from when Andrew Strauss came into a position, the focus was very, very much on the World Cup in 2019. England were hosting 2 world events in the space of 2 years: the 2017 ICC Champions Trophy and the 2019 World Cup. And everything was gearing up to the second one, really. And obviously they ended up getting to the semi-final, losing disappointingly to the eventual winners, who were Pakistan in 2017. But they're really focusing on that. They know that they're going to be very strong at home, irrespective of some of the gaps that are in their team at the moment. When was the last time England lost a Test series at home? And there have been very few and far between. I think. I think it's more difficult when you go away, and everybody's experiencing that at the moment. With the away cricket in Test matches is incredibly difficult to win, and that's something that I think needs to be looked at and addressed if Test cricket is going to retain being a strong spectacle. Because we want to see even contests, don't we? Home and away, even contests, really, as a viewer, as a spectator, as somebody who's spending lots of money either on Sky subscriptions or TV subscriptions or travelling overseas to watch games. You want to see a contest, don't you? And presently around the world, we're not just in the Ashes, but in many places, around the world. The Indians, for example, over in South Africa, that game looked like it was going to be a bit nip and tuck, but actually ended up being a pretty comfortable win for South Africa at Newlands the other day. So they've definitely gone down the road of aiming for 2019. There's no two ways about it, but knowing that they're going to be incredibly competitive in front of their own fans in Test match cricket.
Let's move on to some questions sent in by listeners to the show or readers over at PitchVision.com. And how this works is we answer the questions, and then from those 2 questions we pick the best one of the week, and that wins a prize, which is an online coaching course from PitchVision Academy at PitchVision.com. You can email us on coach@pitchvision.com if you want to send your questions in or interact with us in any other way. And there's social media ways of getting in touch with us as well, which we'll tell you about towards the end of the show. And the first person who's got in touch with us this week is Steve. And Steve, this is not really a coaching question, but it might prove an interesting discussion. So I thought I'd drop it in. Steve's question is, centuries versus five-fers. Is it harder to get a century than a five-fer? Not a coaching question, but something I've wondered about.
It's a great question. It's a brilliant question. And yesterday I posed this question across in our staff room. Actually, we had a load of cricketing teachers and cricketing coaches around the table. So I chucked it out there and had a little chat about what was happening. And then we started to do it a little bit, and I'm talking snapshot data mining here, as opposed to anything else. So is it more difficult to get a 5 than 100? Well, in Test match cricket, it's easier to get 100 than it is to get a five-fer. And in fact, in international cricket, it is easier statistically in our snapshots of data mining to get 100, because there's the frequency of them tells you that. But actually that changes somewhat when you go to different levels. So, for example, at Millfield last year, it was easier to get 100 than it was to get a five-fer. Now, a lot of that is to do with the amount of overs that you play, because obviously getting 5 wickets isn't always the easiest thing to do when you're playing 20 over cricket, 30 over cricket, 40 over cricket, or 50 over cricket. But we do see a higher prevalence of hundreds. But in club cricket, and I did this based on some imagery on, the honours boards that go out around all the county boards in the UK. I did a real snapshot of about 10 of those boards, picked some random weeks in the season, and had a look at how many hundreds there were versus how many five wicket hauls. And often there was a reverse. So in club cricket, there were more 5 wicket hauls than there were hundreds, because the hundreds would generally run out on the honours board when they got to about 15, maximum down to about 9 in any given week from any given county, whereas there were always 20 5 wicket hauls in there, which I thought was quite interesting. So to me, that comes down to a couple of things. One is the quality of the pitches that people are playing on. It governs which the ball or the bat is going to be in the ascendancy. So test match cricket, one day internationals, and T20s are often played on batting not friendly pitches, but good pitches to bat on, which makes it really difficult for people to get 5 wickets, and so therefore we should celebrate 5 wicket hauls quite significantly. In a lot of independent schools, a lot of the wickets are very, very good indeed, and therefore the frequency tends to be more towards the bat than the ball in terms of meeting those milestones. Yet in club cricket, and this obviously isn't everywhere, and there will be counties where the weather's better or the pitches have been invested in or whatever, but generally there's been a higher frequency of 5 wicket hauls than there has been 100. Again, that is very snapshot data in the league stuff, and I'm happy to be challenged on that, because you'll probably be right. But that's what we discussed, and our views up front may not have been the same as the views that we had after we had a look at some numbers.
Yeah, it is very context dependent, isn't it? But I guess if the question is it harder to get a century, you could look at that in a different way as well. So the frequency is a really good way of looking at it, a good numerical way of looking at it. But you could also say, is it harder physically, mentally, to take 5 or to score 100? And I guess that's another perspective of looking at it, isn't it? Rather than say, what's the difficulty level based on how many times someone was able to do it, but what about what's the difficulty level on an individual basis of I've absolutely given everything and I've managed to squeeze a five-fer compared to scoring 100 on a flat track, and it's still pretty tough. But at the end of the day, I can still stroll home, and I don't need to have an extra couple of hours in bed because of it, whereas the poor old bowler's his knees all swollen up and all the rest of it. So not that I'm saying that the five-fer's worth more, but I always feel like the bowlers complain a lot more than the batsmen, so maybe it is harder for the bowlers.
I guess you've got that massive variability of conditions and what are the circumstances in which you're playing. Are you playing on a nice cool kind of 15 to 20 degree day where bowlers can run in all day and it's not too much challenge on them physically in terms of temperature and the ground is as they would like it and the boundaries are whatever and the pitch is doing X, Y and Z, or are you batting in those in conditions? I could say I've batted in a lot of very cold, wet northern cricket matches when I was young, which were very, very challenging and difficult to bat on. Equally, I've batted on like one of the flattest decks in the world in Australia in 42, 43 degrees and batted for a sort of a fairly significant period of time again. Which one was more difficult? Well, they're actually both very, very challenging in their own way. And some people will deal with the heat better than others. Some people will deal with those conditions and those soft pitches and those kind of bowler-friendly conditions better than others as well, and everyone's going to be slightly different in what they are more accustomed to or what they are better at adapting to. But there are challenges in every time you go out to bat, and there are challenges every time you go out to bowl.
I'm going to say a five-fer because most of the bowlers I know are bigger than me and get angrier than I can handle. So I'm going to say a five-fer because the batsmen are all show ponies anyway, so they don't care if I say a five-fer, but the bowlers might.
I'm with you. I honestly believe that it is easier, particularly nowadays, to get 100 than it is to get a five.
There we go. So there you go, Steve. But a final decision there, never to be argued against. All emails to Gareth. Next question's from Tejbir, and Tejbir says, this is about back foot contact as a bowler. I understand that ideally the back foot contact should be very soft and on the toes, but in my case it's pretty hard and completely flat-footed, which eventually leads to detraining of my speed. Can you give me any advice on this?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I reckon between the three of us, we're going to come up with quite a lot of potential root causes here. One for me is when people run in and then they come in on an angle, or they jump into their back foot contact on an angle and then have to realign themselves to the target. Often then that process, they spend a lot of time on their back foot, which means they're having that heavier land, and they find it difficult to have a light touch, because a light touch would send them off towards fine legs to a right-handed batter, and they need to realign themselves to hit the stumps or hit the batter, depending on what you're aiming at the other end. So that often happens, and we see that when people jump in or run in on quite an acute angle, that they spend too much time on their back leg, and they can't do that sort of pre-turny type thing that is banded around. So that's the first one. The second one is when we see that people are running in and have a huge lean back in their bound stride, that often their weight is so far back when they hit back foot contact that they can't transition off of it very quickly, and as a result that's a pretty heavy landing and takes up a lot of the foot plate, the foot print of your back foot when you do that. So they're the two main causes that I see from a technical one. The other one, obviously, and this is where Sam and yourself might elaborate more, is from a physical point of view. You know that they have a eccentric, concentric, eccentric back foot landing rather than a bit more of a sort of a plyometric and lighter touch as well. So for me, the two technical ones that we see a lot of are that angle, and also having too far back weight position as you go into bound strike and through the air and then into back foot contact.
That last one is interesting because I know that Steph Jones has talked a lot about the two different types of bowlers, and although there is the ideal in terms of getting on and off the back foot, the soft step as it's called sometimes, is important. There are people that don't do that, and they find other ways to generate pace.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's not necessarily something that's going to cause you a problem. It sounds like in Tejbir's case, he is having a problem in that he said he loses speed. Now, I don't know whether that's, I don't know whether he's sort of analysed that, objectively, or whether he's just thinking, oh, because of this, that, which is always something you've got to watch out for, haven't you? But I guess the first question is it actually causing you a problem, or do you think it's causing you a problem because you've been told it's causing you a problem?
I think that's part of the issue, isn't it? Is that directly the reason for a loss of pace? And I remember I used to work with John Wood, who bowled. Gareth will tell me how fast he bowled, but pretty fast, I would have thought, Gareth.
Yeah, decent, yeah.
Up at lengths, and he would have been kind of 85 plus a bit, I would have thought. But he really felt that a lot of the speed that he generated was because he leant back a lot, and that allowed him to, in his mind, and whether or not practically this was the case, but he felt that a lean back and a heavy contact on that back foot then allowed him to really work hard through the delivery stride, as opposed to transferring energy from the run-up through the delivery stride into action. He felt he could work very hard there. He's obviously a very big, strong bloke and powerful bloke, and because of that, he was able to bowl 90 miles an hour. Whether or not he would have bowled faster if he'd gone the other way, it's difficult to know now. And I'd probably be of the viewpoint that, having seen him bowl a bit, there's probably a balance between the two that he could have struck. I think he probably went back a little bit further than was necessary. But there will be lots of bowlers out there like him who feel that actually the way they move and spending more time on that back foot for them actually helps them, whether it's a case of stabilising and generating more power from being more stable, as Gareth has suggested. It can sometimes happen if you're not direct in your approach and you find yourself having to redirect your alignment. But I would first of all go down the options that Gareth has put out there, which is making sure your alignment's good, making sure your weight's forward. But there will be people who get a benefit out of that lean back, and there will be people who feel that that's what adds them the extra 3-4 miles an hour. First option for me, for just have a look at the rest of your action. Are there any other things there? Are there any obvious points of misalignment where your legs or arms or whatever it might be aren't moving to and from the target? How are you doing with other things like synchronisation in terms of your upper body working with your lower body? And also, how does your training around your bowling impact on the speed that you're developing? So are you training and bowling 15 overs a day at kind of 70-80% because you're prepared for long spells, or actually are you training to develop power? Are you doing the things that we've talked about quite a lot over the last 6-12 months that will help with power development, such as first of all the technical side, but the med ball work, the power work with lower body, upper body, etc. That's going to give you a bit more speed when it comes to transferring into bowling. So quite a lot to think about there, but obviously you've got in your mind that this is a factor, but don't be consumed by one thing. Be aware that there will be many more things going on in your action that are all influential.
I think the important thing, building on what you just said there, Sam, is the people that do use a heavier land on the back foot. And crikey, there were so many people that I played against that would have been in that bracket actually. There was a guy called Carl Rackerman who leant back quite a long way and landed quite heavy on his back foot, but was incredibly strong, just like John Wood that you mentioned there. Patrick Patterson, who I fortunately faced when he was having an absolute stinker and his action had gone to pieces, but he used to have a lot of weight in his back foot, and lean back a reasonable amount as well. But these are incredibly strong individuals that were able to use what they were doing in a positive fashion, and it sounds to me in this case that isn't necessarily happening. There's a mismatch between the amount of strength and the technique that's going on, which then causes him to think that is there another way, and so when you've got that mixed match, then I think you need to look elsewhere really, and maybe have a look at the alignment of your run up, or the alignment of your jump, which often happens. We see people turn in on their jump phase and then have to realign at the crease. That is something which is incredibly common, in particular with young bowlers. And I remember years and years ago when I was trying to be a bowler, actually trying to do that, because Terry Alderman got incredibly close to the stump, so everybody was trying to do it at that time. But obviously, from an alignment point of view, it worked for him, but it certainly didn't work for me. That is for sure. So have a little look at your own action. Again, video is a great starting point, isn't it? Getting that video footage from behind and then from the side, you'll be able to see exactly how that back leg is working, and whether your thoughts in your head are actually being matched up in what you're seeing on the screen as well.
Okay, that is just about all we've got time for on the show this week. So we are going to wrap up. But before we go, we're just going to decide on the winner of the competition this week. The online coaching course from PitchVision Academy at pitchvision.com is up for grabs. And the two questions were Steve's one about centuries and five-fers, and Tejvi's question about back foot contact as a fast bowler. Which one did you prefer this week, Gareth?
I thought two really good questions this week, but just because it was so different, you said it wasn't a coaching question, but actually it got a number of coaches around the country and on air on this podcast to have a good discussion about it. So I'm going to go with Steve's.
Superb. Congratulations, Steve. And Gareth, if other people are listening in and want to send in their question to us, how can they get in touch with the show?
they can give us a call on 0203 239 7543 or drop us an email on coach@pitchvision.com.
That's right. The rest of the housekeeping is various other ways to get in touch with us and how to listen to the show regularly. Getting in touch with us is pretty easy. PitchVision.com is the easiest way. Head over there, find the PitchVision Academy account by searching for that, and then send us a message on PitchVision.com. Or you can do it through Facebook, Facebook.com/PitchVision Academy, or Twitter @PitchVisionAcad. You can subscribe to the show for free in any podcast app. Just do a search for PitchVision Academy in there and you'll be able to subscribe. Or if you want to listen to the show through the PitchVision website, you can do that as well. You can download the show or you can stream it straight from the website. All of the shows right back to episode 1 are available there. Just need to go to pitchvision.com/academy and click on the podcast link. That's all for this week. We hope you listen next week, but until then, have a good week. Cheers, Gareth. Cheers, Lavers.
Cheers, fellas.
Cheers, guys.